Good morning, Timothy, once again. Obviously, yes. And good morning to everybody watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, listening to us in Clubhouse. I'm happy to say that this is our first episode of the 5th year of this series. So welcome to this one, to you, Timothy, and once again to everybody who is sitting in front of their computers, watching or just listening and multitasking. Well, who knows with what. Okay, so thank you very much for this. And Timothy, this is the 209th episode. I hope that all is good. You're okay. You unfroze. Thanks for that. And I'll give the word to you now so that we can hear what you're going to talk about in this briefing today.
Let's hope so. So good morning, Maya. Good morning, everybody else. I am reporting from the Japan Politics One-on-One studio of the Good Ship Grill. This is our first broadcast. We've fixed some of the technical issues. There might be some spottiness, as you've already noticed. I froze a little bit, but I think we've solved the Wi-Fi problem. And so going forward, rather than reporting from the shabby back seat of my car, maybe it's from the inside of Grimm's, and that is the hope. So thank you for that. I'm in Katsuyama reporting live on Japanese politics. This is our 209th episode. Congratulations last week, Maya, for our 4 years together. Today is February 9th, 2025. The Prime Minister just came back from visiting with Donald Trump. It was the second time for a foreign leader to visit with the president in the White House. The yen closed out amazingly at 151.38 on Friday. That is a strengthening that we haven't seen in about 12 years. It was in the last 2 weeks, it was 155 and then 156. It reached 150 earlier in the week, I think on Thursday, and then it weakened just a tiny bit. But this is a good sign of things to come. And it's probably just a thermometer read of maybe the appreciation for, Trump meeting with Ishiba and the things that are going together there. And it's probably not an indicator of the appreciation for what's going on inside the parliament, because there's a lot of turmoil going on there. But I'll get into that. The powerful budget committee, as you know, is chaired by a member of the opposition, Jun Azumi. And he is a contender. He is a force to be reckoned with. And he is running that budget committee. In 30 years, the LDP has not relinquished that powerful chairmanship position. And this is the first time, and it's also the first time in 30 years that the LDP doesn't have a majority control of the Diet. So as we've been discussing for these last couple of weeks, they are in a real bind trying to figure out how to get 13 more votes so that they have that majority so that they can pass things. Everybody knows this, and nobody's going to give it to them. So they're courting the other opposition parties, primarily Ishin, which has 38 members, and the Democratic Party for the People, which has 28 members, and courting them to kind of come in to vote for them. It's not working out. The Budget Committee chairman also insisted that the accountant for Seiwakai, Mr. Abe's former faction, which was at the heart of the money scandal, the payback scandal, the accountant was called to testify. He said he might go, and then he refused. He did not show up. So they're thinking of other ways to cajole him to come in. And when he comes in, if he was to testify, maybe in a closed door session, the differences of what he has to say compared to what the other Diet members had to say, these are LDP members, by the way, is going to cause even more controversy and leading up to a potential double election in June or July. Situation. At this point, maybe not, The other thing that the committee chairman did, very unusual, was to question members of the various ministries to come into the budget committee and to defend their budget requests. So this is very unusual. In the past, the LDP would offer the budget, they'd let people talk about it until March 2nd, and then they would pass it up to the upper house, and if they didn't like it, so what? Right now, they don't have the numbers to do that, and so they have to accommodate them. The budget committee chairman has called in the various ministries to come in, so that's eaten up 3 days of this very limited amount of time. And so if the budget doesn't pass through the lower house by March 2nd, it's going to create great controversy, and that's what it looks like it's being built up for. So there's a lot to be watching there over the next 2 or 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks, exactly 21 days until March 2nd. The Constitutional Democratic Party also offered its own budget in contravention of the government's budget. LDP and Komeito offered their budget just before the year ran out. And that's the budget that everybody's talking about. And then the Constitutional Party came up with their own budget and said, we'd like you to consider this. So that once again raises more issues and causes more time to be spent. It just looks like there is a concerted effort to run out the clock here. Let me see. Tomorrow, the Kansas City Chiefs play the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, the 59th Super Bowl. That will be played in Caesars Superdome. And although it doesn't really impact a lot of people in our global audience, it is one of the religions of the Americans to watch Super Bowl. So it's a big deal. The President of the United States has never sat in a Super Bowl, and Donald Trump will join that one. It happens on Sunday. It will be in Japan time tomorrow morning. And so there's a lot of people gathering around televisions here. Not really Japanese politics, but it is something that is, something that's going on that will have some influence over U.S.-Japan relations in a very minor sense. Anyway, I just want to touch on that. There's much more to talk about. I'd like to kick it back to you, Maya. And then after your promo for our sponsors, our fabulous sponsors, I can get into the details a little bit deeper.
Thank you, Timothy. And if you have lived in Japan for a while, you already know that it's really difficult to communicate with real estate agents, and well, they talk their own language, and there are quite a few barriers there. But if you still live here and you have any projects in mind, we do want to say that Kanchu, that is based in Yokohama, can be really helpful to you. So Kanchu or Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, you can find them online. They're a real estate agent, and they do buying and selling real estate in Yokohama. They do also real estate investment and property management. You can also reach out to James at james@kanchu.com and talk with him. He's on LinkedIn as well. He's got great posts there. So if you haven't connected with him yet, please do and talk with him about any needs and projects you might have. So Timothy, let's go back now to what you but what you're going to talk about in more detail, and see how things have developed during the past 1 week in Japanese politics. So,
great, thank you very much. So everybody, as you know, if you're a long-term listener, or even if you're tuning in now, this is Japanese Politics One-on-One. I tee up some of the issues. The real heat and light is generated in the Q&A period when I finish talking about some of the issues that have happened over the last week or so. So if you have issues or questions, you want to say something, you want to raise a question that maybe I can answer, maybe I can shed some light on, but there are other people in the audience who can also contribute, and we encourage you to do that as well. So with that, have at it, write to Maya either through LinkedIn or through one of the vehicles that we have already set up. In any event, Donald Trump met with Ishiba, the second national leader for the president to meet in the White House. The first one was Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, and that was a huge deal. That was a huge press conference. They really rocked the world. I think it was on Monday, and now on Friday in the United States, he meets with Mr. Ishiba. This is a pretty big deal. You might remember that Mr. Abe was the first foreign leader to meet Trump in Trump won when he became president-elect. And he really made a beeline to establish that relationship. And when Mr. Ishiba and Mr. Trump met, so the teams have been meeting for a week, and then the leader comes in, and then they have a press conference, they have a meet and greet in front of the cameras. They don't really have a whole lot of time to get warm with each other and build that relationship. But you would never know it based on what they did in front of the cameras. So I think just the long and short of it is that the trip can be qualified as a huge success for Mr. Ishiba and also for Donald Trump. No big issues, no tariff issues, no controversies. It was kind of like a bro fest. Mr. Ishiba was very complimentary and praising of Donald Trump, which many people have come to expect. You know, he appreciates that. He reacts well to that. But also Mr. Trump was really gracious in his remarks about Mr. Ishiba, talking about how handsome he is and how well he is appreciated in Japan, and how much Mr. Abe respected him as a leader, and how much Mr. Trump personally feels like this is one of the great leaders of Japan, and he's somebody that is going to be contributing long term. So if you're Mr. Ishiba, you can imagine that's like manna from heaven coming from the mouth of Donald Trump. He's not talking about tariffs. He's talking about how my hair looks great and how I look very powerful and I'm well appreciated by my countrymen. And you're scratching your head, but it's studio, it's art and performance. But it did roll very well. I think they talked about a lot of issues that they announced. For example, the Japanese will invest more than $1 trillion into the United States in foreign direct investment. They talked about U.S. steel and Nippon Steel and the controversy that surrounds that. It looks like it has some progress there. President Trump is, the real deal maker. And it looks like even though the Biden administration killed it, it might be resurrected in some form or another that would benefit Japan and would benefit the U.S. economy as well. And I think Donald Trump and Mr. Ishiba cut some sort of an agreement there. Mr. Trump will be meeting. He met with the CEO of U.S. Steel last week. He will be meeting with him again this next coming week. Mr. Ishiba returns back to to Japan today, and then this next week is going to be really crazy busy for him. But it's coming back with a real wind in his back that I think he and Kasumi Gaseki really appreciates. Let me say, Mr. Abe's influence was pretty obvious throughout. Mr. Trump reflected on Mr. Abe a couple of times and said, Mr. Abe even told him about Mr. Ishiba and what a dynamic and wonderful leader he is. So although there was much trepidation in Kasumi Gaseki in Nagatacho, in Kasumi Gaseki, it's the ministries and they're worried about tariffs. And even if it's not tariffs, what's going on with Canada and Mexico has a huge impact on Japan, because Japanese manufacturers have set up shops to take advantage of U.S., Canada, U.S., Mexico trade treaties, and they've set up productions there. And if Canada or Japan, Canada or Mexico are going to hit with tariffs, it's going to have reverberations into Japan. So there's a lot of trepidation there. There is a 30-day respite on the implementation, depending on performance by Canada and Mexico. And I think we'll get through that one. But also, Mr. Trump has talked about, the Paris Climate Accord, the World Health Organization, U.S. aid, which also impacts, the U.S.'s standing throughout the rest of the world, U.S. aid I'm talking about. And when the U.S. pulls out of those relationships, it leaves something of a vacuum that Japan is also engaged in. And so what happens in that? I mean, does Japan need to pony up a little bit more, or should they follow the U.S. lead and pull back a little bit, particularly with the Paris Climate Accord? The prime minister has endorsed, going carbon neutral by 2050. That's a very aggressive target, and we're on track to meet that. 2030 is just down the corner, and there are several significant milestones that the entire economy, the energy policy of Japan is geared towards meeting. So with the U.S. stepping back and maybe the priority of these various international accords being less prominent, maybe some of the relaxations and the generation of the economy as a consequence of that will be coming to the fore. So it's something to really watch. The Japan has committed to investment of another $1 trillion in foreign direct investment. How that is distributed will come out in these following weeks. Mr. Ishiba will come back, and the entire diet, particularly the lower house, particularly in the budget committee, is very curious about the discussions and what was agreed to and what are we going to do about that, and what's your view, Mr. Prime Minister? So this will be a very busy week for him, but also it will be revealed to us in a lot of these Q&As and the testimonies that are provided what actually Japan's stance is going to be. Let me see. The United States, through Mr. Trump, recommitted to the United States full commitment for full spectrum U.S. military capabilities devoted to Japan, including the Senkaku Islands, and more energy purchases from Japan, more military purchases. The Prime Minister has even said in weeks past that probably the 2% GDP, although it's a 5-year term now, we're in the middle of that, it probably needs to be extended and, in fact, increased beyond 2%, which is probably good news for the United States, reducing their coverage. There was, as far as I know, no discussion about Okinawa or the coverage there or the movement of the air base to Henoko, but probably in the background there, these conversations were going on. More energy purchases from the United States, LNG in particular. And let me see, the commitment of the United States for addressing the North Korea issues with regard to missiles, and not as powerfully and not as committedly, but also the abduction issue, which is a very thorny issue, but one that's very important to the Japanese and to the Prime Minister. Also, Mr. Trump has talked about that, the abduction issue, in the past. So his good friend Kim Jong-un is, has been mentioned, and I think that we can anticipate Mr. Trump reigniting that relationship and making bold moves to create a more stable and more peaceful and less aggressive Asia Pacific region. And I think that there's a lot of energy going into that direction. And as I said, Nippon Steel and US Steel, it's still on the table, and I think there are going to be more discussions there. Moving forward, and the key issue for this briefing today is that you have to remember that the LDP hasn't been in this situation where it has to negotiate, really negotiate, not just pretend negotiate, but really negotiate with the opposition parties. And it's really coming down to brass tacks. In less than 3 weeks, the diet bill must be passed by the lower house and kicked upstairs to the upper house. The upper house then has 30 days to review it, to question it, to modify it if they want to, but the lower house still holds. The lower house can say, no, the bill that we passed you is the bill that you're supposed to consider. It's either hands up or hands down. If you don't like it, tell us you don't like it. But according to the Constitution with the budget, our vote still holds. So if you don't like it, then it comes back to us, but it's passed automatically and it becomes law. So everything is geared to March 2nd. It's possible that there could be negotiations in the lower house after it's passed up to the upper house, but I think there's a bigger game going on here, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit, in the fact that the LDP, even with Komeito, doesn't have a majority. It lacks 13 votes, and in fact, on some issues, Komeito is beginning to think, this idea of getting into bed with the LDP, it was a good idea 20 years ago, but we're the clean government party, and the LDP is not looking like a very clean government, especially if this accountant ever gets an opportunity to testify and talk about how the money was spread around and how long this has been going on and that sort of thing. So the LDP could look really bad. So the game that's going on now, and let me just go through some numbers. I know it's difficult to kind of grasp it, but with the LDP and Komeito, they have 222 individuals. And once again, Komeito is a little bit iffy on some issues, but the LDP has 196 members in the lower house. And with Komeito, they have 222. In order to have half, you have to have 233. So they're lacking that in the lower house. On the other hand, the Constitutional Democratic Party has 148 members. Ishin has 38 members, and the Democratic Party for the People has 28 members. The other parties make up a smattering of that, but still, that's a pretty close race. And I think the game here, and the Constitutional Democratic Party has already pretty much laid this out for the LDP to consider, and for their partner opposition parties. So they're not partners, but they're in the fact that they're against the LDP, or they're trying to get to the LDP. The LDP is now courting Ishin for free school lunches, and the Democratic Party for the People for raising the floor of tax-free salaries. And they're making only very slight headway there. The more likely outcome is that the Constitutional Democratic Party, with the chairman of the budget committee kind of leading that charge, is going to form a grand coalition. So the opposition parties, one of you can break ranks and join the LDP and then pass the budget. But what are you going to get for it? You know, the rest of us are going to be angry at you. Why don't you just join us? Let's form a coalition. We can defeat the LDP. We'll give you, when we take over, we'll give you some cabinet positions, and let's kick the bums out and then reformat Japanese politics. And that looks like a real play that's going on here. And even with the LDP courting Ishin, that's fragile at best. It's not a big play. It could work. The LDP would have the additional 13 votes it needs to pass the budget. But there's a lot that's going to happen in these next 3 weeks. So please continue to stay tuned as we move forward with this. So we'll report to you every week on this. So the Trump visit was important, but the economy and inflation are important to the prime minister as well. He's got negatives on that, although of the three things that the prime minister needs to do well, one was form some sort of a relationship or have some kind of bonding with President Trump. I think he's succeeded in achieving that. It's the economy that he's got to come up with, and then he needs to form some sort of relationship with one of the opposition parties. That looks pretty iffy, as I've just talked about. The other one is the economy, and it's not looking so great. Real wages fell 0.2% in 2024, and this is the third straight year. So the numbers are coming up from last year. It doesn't look very good. The consumer price index rose 2.7%. If you're watching this, then these numbers are familiar to you. Inflation was in October 2.3%, in November 2.9%. The Bank of Japan Governor Ueda wants it to be at 2%, and I think he's almost ready to throw up his hands and say we can't achieve it, and we're not going to achieve it in 2025 either. Fresh food has been up 17.3% over the last couple of months. That is very alarming. And the core inflation is up 3%. So that was just in December. So the Bank of Japan now projects that the inflation will increase to 2.4% in the after March, and the consumer prices for March going forward, it was at 1.9%, and it will now be upward revised to 2.4%. So there's a lot that is going on that's somewhat out of the hands of the prime minister, but it is going to impact. We've got very little time before the upper house election, and if there's going to be a double election, which seems to be more and more a growing likelihood, it's really a tenuous situation for the LDP. So you're going to see lots of action going on here, some in the positive realm, some in the negative realm, and it really depends on if you want to kick the bums out and get a fresh start, or if you're economy and you want to leave that part of the argument. Part of the argument in different polls is, let's stick with Mr. Ishiba because there's nobody else that could do the job. I mean, he's the guy. So that's typically how polls report this. but also it's one of the concerns of the voting population is the LDP has been running the government, and you bring somebody else in, they've never run the government. They don't know how this sort of machinery works, and it will be really clunky at best. So it's best to stick with the guys who know what they're doing. Kasumi Gaseki will stay no matter who is running the government, but it will be tumultuous. And so we're going to continue to watch that. The Philippines lower house, just in moving to new issues, the Philippine lower house has just impeached the vice president, Sara Duterte. She's the daughter of the previous president of the Philippines. She is vice president to the president, who is Ferdinand Marcos from the Marcos family. He's president, she's vice president. There's a huge rift between the two of them, and she was impeached by the lower house. That's by a vote of 215 to the entire house is 306 members, and 215 of them voted to impeach her. So this will now move to the Senate. The Senate consists of 23 members, and they will have a trial. But it really is tumultuous for the Philippines. You might remember her father, Duterte, was the prime minister. He had the let's get rid of drugs and drug smuggling and that sort of thing. And a lot of drug smugglers were killed and murdered in the streets, and he was a real firebrand. This is his daughter. She wants to become president, and it looks like this is going to be a real crimp to her. Japan, U.S., and Philippines relationships is very strong. The military arm of what's going on in the Philippines is widely supported by the United States, and it's one of the flashpoints, as you know, in the controversy involving China and Taiwan. If there's going to be kinetic action, the Philippines are going to be one of the first places to receive that, and also Japan as well. So there's a lot of military capabilities that are being shared there. There are Philippine soldiers that are training with the Japanese armaments, and Coast Guard vessels are being donated and gifted to the Philippine Coast Guard as well. So there's a lot going on there. Something to watch, potentially a political flashpoint going on there. I'll continue to report on that. Also, the Diet has approved, once again, an active cybersecurity legislation. You might remember that this was the hot issue last year. The prime minister wanted to push it through the legislation, even during the supplemental Diet hearing, the extraordinary Diet. It kind of failed there, and they've resurrected again. The cabinet has re-supported that, and this is huge because it allows the capabilities of the government of Japan to promptly move against cyber attacks, promptly and preeminently move against cyber attacks. So if the legislation goes through, it will go into effect quickly, but it'll take a year for the regulations and the rules to be applied. It won't be until 2026 of April when the legislation goes into effect. But the legislation has been resubmitted, so cybersecurity is a big issue here. Most of the attacks, probably 94% of the attacks, are coming out from outside Japan. The cybersecurity attacks that hospitals and government ministries and waterworks and companies are getting come from overseas, mostly Russia and North Korea, as most pundits have reported. Shunto is the labor spring offensive. It has already started this week. This is where management and labor get together and they say, look, we supply labor for you, the managers of the corporations, and the salaries are not keeping up with inflation, and we insist on more salary and higher salary and more bonuses. And it looks like for most of the major companies, this is a pretty big deal, wages might increase up to 5%. That's a big leap. Usually these wage increases annual year on year are in the 1%, 2%, maybe 2.5%, including bonuses and that sort of thing. But to leap to 5% is an acknowledgement that inflation is here. They can't keep up with it. Going 5% when the inflation is now at 2.7, maybe they make a little bit more as a result of that, even though inflation is eating up a lot of that. But this is probably only going to impact the large corporations that employ, 500 people or more. The vast majority of Japanese companies, as you know, are, less than 100 people. So the employees there are probably not going to get a 5% raise. But the way the Japanese economy works, the ministries and then the big companies set the tone, and then the smaller companies negotiate based on that. And sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. In any event, in Japan, the spring offensive, it always starts this time of the year. It ends around April or May. May usually has large demonstrations, the labor against management, and then it settles down. The deal is cut, and then we move on for the rest of the year. Let me see. What else is there? I think that's it. I'd like to move on to the Q&A because that's where a lot of the real beef of what's going on in U.S., Japan, global politics with Japan is talked about through the questions that are provided by Maya and those that you feed to her. Maya?
Yes, thank you, Timothy. Well, yes, we have accumulated several questions this morning. Before that, though, once again, I want to say, to give a word of thank you to our other sponsor, and that is Houze Inc. Once again, if you think that working in the field of real estate is difficult, that you have trouble reaching out to real estate agents, please do not hesitate to reach out to Houze, because you can talk with them in English, you can talk to them in Japanese as well. So, and they will listen to you and customize their services to your needs and your requests. Houze is available, they're based in Yokohama, and you can find them online at www.houze.co.jp. You can connect with them online as well. If you have any projects in custom home design and construction or commercial building construction. Also, Hano Rushizawa Howell is somebody who can help you there. You can connect with her on LinkedIn or also via the email, which is here on screen at the moment. Her email will be also included in the description of the video on YouTube. So, Timothy, yes, I know, you cannot wait for me to finish. But, well, thank you very much for actually bearing with me. And to everybody who is watching us, thank you for being so patient because, I know. Whatever. So let me start with the questions. First, I want to start. Oh, that's a good answer. That's, how my daughter answers when she sees me a kind of, getting strict to her. Oh, you froze there. Okay. Anyway, so we got a question to the video of last week, and I want to read out the question to you. You just you talked about salaries and that the real salaries have actually decreased in value. And that question is about them. So the YouTube viewer wrote, I saw a report saying that Japanese real wages were falling. If this is true, how do you think the parties will react to this reality? The political parties in the parliament.
So when real wages fall, it's kind of like, whose fault is that? It's generally the economy. And so people blame the prime minister. He is the administrator. Probably some of it has to do with the Bank of Japan and what they're doing with the interest rates and also pegging the inflation rate, that sort of thing. But, it's like in all things, the leader is really responsible. And so you're not really quite blaming the Ministry of Economy. You're not blaming, the foreign ministry. It's the top dog. So that means the LDP will suffer as a consequence of that. They're doing all that they can. They had the supplemental budget. It runs until March, right? The end of March, the supplemental budget that was passed that pushes money into the economy for, subsidizing fuel and energy costs. So people after March, the supplemental budget will run out. And now we're back on track. They're going to pass the budget. That's what they're working on now. So if there is pain and cost increases to be had, it's going to be starting in March, in April, May, June, and then June is, the upper house election. So the timing isn't right. but it is clear it's not a a guess. Real wages are falling. They're talking about it all the time. Many people who are trying to hire foreign workers, in fact, from Malaysia, from the Philippines, from South Korea, wherever, they're not having as much participation because the workers are saying, I can make more money in my own country. I don't have to go to a foreign country and then suffer the indignation of working for the Japanese, and I can make as much money working here in my own economy. So they're having even more trouble getting foreign workers to come.
Right. And also we've got this from Hiroko-san. She says Daiwa House has increased the salary for newly hired employees by 20%. And I think that, yes, quite a few companies are actually thinking of how they can retain their workforce or probably, hire more talent, attract more talent against this background. And in line with this, also Hiroko-san writes that the price of rice is going up, and I learned that JA or producers are holding and waiting for prices to go up. So maybe there is some hoarding there. I also read in the news that the government has decided to release part of the rice stock they have and to let it into the market so that they can somehow keep the prices of the price of the rice not going down or keep it at the current level. So there are forces in the market, and also they are politically controlled probably, or political forces as well, that are contradicting each other. But still, I think that while the farmers may be hoarding rice in expectations of higher prices, the government is trying to keep the prices from not going up. So, Timothy, if you have any insights on this, then please share them with us.
Thank you. So as everybody knows, rice is the staple of food in Japan, and the prices there really impact inflation. They impact the cost of living, consumer price index, that sort of thing. And there is hoarding going on. It's not going on from Japan Agriculture, JA. It is actually going on, as you said or suggested, from the farmers or from maybe third parties. Somebody is purchasing the futures on rice, and they're waiting for that price to go up. And the government is trying hard to release its stockpiles to keep the price down. But I think until we get into, now we're in the winter months. Spring will be the planting season, summer, and then there'll be a harvest in the fall. But there's a long haul to go before there'll be another rice crop. So that is a big impact to the cost of consumers. But it's not just the cost of rice. I mean, it's all over, all fresh foods. 17% increase. I mean, that is astounding. 20% increase for new hires. I can kind of appreciate and understand that. There just aren't enough people, so you've got to steal people from other places. There is a lot of job hopping that's going on. And plus the new hires, these are kids in their 20s. They're finished college. This is their first job. They have other options and other opportunities. And the companies are desperate for people. They need a certain number of people just to meet the certain production qualifications. And with the declining population, there's a real struggle to get the people in the desks.
Yes, indeed. And also, just let me go back a little bit to the prices you were talking about, and how I think that now it's really a golden time for the opposition parties to press even harder to the LDP, because as you mentioned earlier, maybe 2 or 3 minutes earlier, so basically the LDP, the ruling party, even though they're in a weak coalition at the moment, they will be blamed for the inflation and for the rising prices and everything. And now the opposition, they feel strong, not just because the LDP is in a weak coalition, but because they sense that, well, with the inflation and and everything, so they can actually gain quite a lot in this situation by putting the blame and the responsibility on the LDP. Funnily enough, they do not talk about Komeito, right? So no blame is assigned to Komeito about the economic situation at the moment.
Yeah. So that's a great point that you bring up, Maya. People need to understand that the game that we are in is dictated not just by politics, but also by the media. And so let's say that the budget doesn't pass by March 2, then recriminations will be flying. The LDP has more of an ability with the mass media to pump stories out. So we wanted to pass the budget. We wanted to continue the economy recovery of the Japanese, but the opposition parties are not doing that. They're fighting against us. And so the opportunity for them to besmirch the opposition parties for not coalescing with them is a strong one. And so you just need to understand it's not the whole game. And just what NHK or what some of the press says, it's like in France or England or in the United States, the press cabal is frequently aligned with the government because they have their support, they have the press clubs, they have access to information that they want to preserve. But I think that this tsunami that we're talking about with the economy, with inflation, with prices, with the declining population, with the rise in rice prices, all of these things that are going on are going to have a big negative impact. And it could be blamed on, really likely the current administration. And in that atmosphere, a double election sounds like a very attractive option. In the last election, the opposition parties kicked out the LDP. They took over the majority. They took the majority away from the LDP and have put the LDP in this very tight situation, also fueled by this money scandal, which hasn't died yet. And more revelations are going to compel people. We did it, 4 months ago, and we got lots of, the Constitutional Democratic Party increased in their numbers. Ishin lost a few numbers, but the Democratic Party for the People grew by 250%. So let's do it again. And instead of having just the upper house, let's have a lower house election at the same time. Let's kick their asses and let's take over the government. I think that's the path that is a likely scenario for us. We won't know until the time approaches, but little by little, we get little indication of that. And for you watching this and learning what the ins and outs are and what the tactics are, you're a little bit better prepared to anticipate what might possibly happen. And also in conversations with people, it's part of your job. It's part of your description of what's going on within your company in Japan. These are key features to understand. So I appreciate you the show.
Well, thank you for that, Timothy. And it also reminds me that there is an event coming up this Thursday at 5 o'clock on February the 13th, when you're going to talk about why it is important to be informed about political events, but also how you can actually lobby in Japan and advocate for your cause. And we have already subscribers or people who have registered. They belong to private companies here and also some authorities, regional authorities. So if you are interested in it, if you want to learn a little bit more about this or even more about this, yes, please sign up for the event. It starts at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe of Friday. No, Thursday. Yeah. So it's Thursday.
Because Friday is Valentine's Day, so we have to keep that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we have to be, standing by to receive chocolates from all of our employees, Maya.
Okay, yes. So the giri choco, right? That's the
right. But anyway, this briefing is of global importance, as you can appreciate. It's a discussion about how lobbying impacts policy, and how you can get engaged in that and why you should get engaged in it. Lobbying by foreign companies is just as valid as lobbying by Japanese companies. Japanese companies do it all the time. Foreign companies should know how to do it and should participate at some level. And if the issue is somewhat critical to you, you can change it. You can make a difference that impacts your bottom line. So that's the focus of the discussion. Thanks, Maya, for the plug.
No, I'm actually looking forward to that briefing because there are so many things I need to learn and want to learn as well. So, but now let me go back to the questions. And we have a question on LinkedIn from Manabe-san. So, well, we probably most of our listeners and viewers already know that Daisaku Ikeda, the founder of, I think, the Soka Gakkai,
Right.
and so he passed away in November last year. And, oh no, November, was it 2023? Oh, we are
Nobody
all
wins.
right, 2023. So actually, it's already a year ago, over a year ago. Yes, but Mr. Okay, so Manabe-san's question is, will the death of Mr. Ikeda have any impact on the Komeito party from now on? I assume it will have an impact on voting behavior in elections. What do you think, Timothy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I wish somebody in the audience who is a member of Soka Gakkai would participate with a little bit of insight here. Uh, uh, Mr. Ikeda was the founder of Soka Gakkai. He was the creator, the architect of the political wing. It used to be the government affairs wing, and then it grew in importance maybe 30 years ago to form a political party, which is now known as Komeito. So Komeito was initially the it's a little in some people don't like affiliation, but everybody knows that that's what the core affiliation is. The reported death, I mean, he has not been seen in public for many years. It was reported that he had died mysteriously years ago, but they didn't want it to be out in the open. They didn't want people to know about it because his presence and his personality was so huge. The fact that now the organization is admitting that, yes, indeed, he has passed on. Komeito has a new leader. You might remember they went through a little bit of difficulty. They had the leader. He resigned, Mr. Yamaguchi. The new leader stepped in. There was no election. It was just he was appointed. He lost his election, so they had to come up with a new leader in the last lower house election. A very surprising move. So yes, it's not. I don't mean to suggest that there's turmoil in Komeito, but I think that there is soul searching. That with this scandal, this huge scandal that's impacting the LDP, is making members of Komeito wonder. Our affiliation with the LDP seems to paint us as liars and as not true to our principles. So with the change in the leadership from the founder to somebody else, yes, it's very likely that there could be a different change here, and that's the great fear of the LDP. Along with let's form some other coalition, and the LDP has had their chance. They've abused it. They've taken money. They haven't paid taxes. They've gotten off, scot-free with many of these illegalities. And let's try somebody else. I think that temperature, that atmosphere, is beginning to dawn on a lot of voters.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And
Maya?
once again, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Whew. Yes. Now, I'm going back to LinkedIn and I'll start with a key paragraph from the US-Japan joint statement. It comes from, I guess, from this, yes, from the meeting of PM Ishiba, from Mr. Ishiba and President Trump. So the key paragraph is, the two leaders emphasized the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait as an indispensable element of security and prosperity for the international community. They encouraged the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues and opposed any attempts to unilaterally change the status quo by force or coercion. The two leaders also expressed support for Taiwan's meaningful participation in international organizations. Could you comment, this is the question, could you comment on the references to Taiwan in the US-Japan joint statement that appears to be a significant advance from the past in terms of strengthening security for Taiwan by involving both the US and Japan in its security? Perhaps the first time that has been done overtly.
Yeah, I think it's just representative of what's been happening. If you're following this show, Maya, you know that these military alliances with Great Britain, with Australia, with Italy. All of these companies, these like-minded countries, are joining forces with Japan. Japan is, because of Article 9 of the Constitution, is not able to produce offensive weaponry. It kind of benefits from the nuclear umbrella provided by the United States, and with America first and the new President Trump trying to bring things back to the United States, that means it's a redistribution of the offensive capabilities. Japan isn't going to really be able to handle it unless they, change their constitution. There is still discussion about changing the Constitution, Article 9. But in the meantime, other countries need to provide those offensive capabilities. I don't think that song has changed. I think it's only being enhanced. And I think this meeting between Trump and Ishiba is heightening that, and also, reestablishing that. I think the discussion of going from 1% to 2% of GDP, and now there is a discussion, I don't know how much velocity it has right now, but going from 2% to 3%. First of all, Japan needs to get its economy back. Rapidus has received, cabinet approval for more funding in Hokkaido. So Japan needs a new industry. It needs a new launching pad. It was, and it has been, automobiles for a long time. It was semiconductors 30 years ago. They did most of the semiconductor manufacturing, and then it was offshored, and they lost that edge. Japan is desperately looking for that new industry that it can focus on with the declining population, but they've got to kickstart that economy. Many people believe that it's just not going to happen. The Japanese aren't capable of doing it, but kicking and screaming, they are going to try and reestablish themselves as the world producer of advanced chips and massive manufacturing. That's happening in Kumamoto and also in Hokkaido as well. And it also matches with what Mr. Ishiba said about regional revitalization. So let's focus on Hokkaido, usually known as a rural area, a lot of farming, a lot of skiing and hot springs and stuff like that there, but not a center for industrial capacity. Kumamoto is the same way, but both of those are now being redeveloped. They match perfectly with what the Prime Minister wants to do, and also to reestablish some form of a prominence in a global market.
Yes, and I think that basically Japan, as you mentioned, many people say that Japan is not going to be able to do that. But I think that if you have lived in Japan for a long enough time, you know that the Japanese corporations and the government are entirely capable of actually coming back. And they need a crisis for that. And we are in a crisis, maybe not as dire as it needs to be, for everybody to bounce back immediately. But I do have faith in this. And also, I wanted to touch upon the talks about Japan Steel and US Steel, the deal. So, and obviously, this topic was it was a topic of conversation between PM Ishiba and President Trump, right? So it seems that this deal may take time, but probably, it's once again going back into a positive direction. And also, Timothy, I wanted to hear something from you about talking about the deal, the merger between Nissan and Honda. Now we know that it is off the table because they couldn't reach an agreement about the conditions and the direction in which Honda wanted Nissan to go. And now this Nissan has been approached by a Taiwanese electronics producer. And to me, it is strange because the automobile industry has been a strategic industry for a very long time for the Japanese economy, and the government has actually done a lot to protect it. Sure. And I wonder whether there is any political play there, and whether if there are talks about Nissan and the Taiwanese company working together, if this is going to be political or if it is going to be impacted by politics. So this is I think it's a multi-layered question, and I apologize for this, but it's an interesting thing to know, because funnily enough, two Japanese automakers did not agree on working together, and now talks are about a foreign or well company that is not actually in this field working with Nissan. What is your take on this?
Well, the funny thing is that two automobile manufacturers were actually talking to each other. You
Yes,
know, it
right.
was kind of an admission that we are in trouble. We need more funds. We're not producing. We're not getting the market share that we need. Let's take a book. Let's take a page out of the book from Carlos Ghosn and see what we can do about amalgamating or joining forces or taking over. I mean, look at BMW. Look at Volkswagen. Look at these major companies who have absorbed these manufacturing processes. I mean, even Rolls-Royce, it has a BMW engine in it, so they're economizing by making cuts and also double utility for parts and processes that they incorporate into their cars. But I think this is just an indication that this industry is becoming more of a dominated by 3 or 4 companies globally. That's what's happening. And I think Nissan and Honda have acknowledged that, but they need to come up with something a lot more powerful than that. But yes, politics always plays a role in it. And it's interesting that it's coming from Taiwan. So it is possible that this blending of what's going on in Taiwan is integrated with the Philippines, with Japan, so that anything that happens in Taiwan is going to economically, politically affect other countries. So China, step back, give up this desire of yours, this preeminent drive to unify China, Greater China, with Taiwan. It's just not going to happen. Not now, not later. Give it up. But it looks like that's they're hell bent on achieving that one way or another. They have actually said that, if by force, if necessary. So that really puts everybody ill at ease, and it would be so disruptive to the global economy, and particularly in this region. So yeah, it's something that we're all watching, and I think it's top of mind for the president of the United States and for Mr. Ishiba and all of the other countries. They don't want that kind of controversy to happen. I mean, even with North Korea, it's not impacting North Korean trade with South Korea or with Japan, because that's almost negligible, but it is creating a security risk, and that's for trade and investment throughout the region, that's a big deal.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And yes, so I think that we have gone through all the questions, and once again we have yes. Okay, we have a comment here
Oh,
on LinkedIn from Byron Johnston, and well, he says, this is the second week when my question was featured, but there was no attribution to me. This is unlike the attribution to other questions from others, hence I will not be submitting questions for the next week. Well, Byron, thank you very much for letting us know. So our policy has changed, and we actually are working on giving attribution to LinkedIn members who have pictures on their profiles. And I apologize for that, but also because LinkedIn, we have received a lot of information that LinkedIn recently has been used by a lot of, let's say, bots and not real people. So
yeah.
I apologize for not announcing this in advance, but yes, that's the policy at the moment, and we would appreciate it if you had a picture on your profile, so that we could actually feel safe and do not put our other viewers at kind of unease. Thank you very much for that and for your understanding. It's very much appreciated indeed. Okay, so, and Timothy, I know that you're very happy to go because, yes, you are on your boat and you want to actually spend as much time working on it or enjoying just the cabin there as much as possible. I know that your friends are waiting for you there as well. So thanks a lot to everybody who stayed with us and watched us. We'll be here once again next week at 8:20. And who knows? Timothy may be reporting once again from his boat.
The
We'll see.
studio.
Or Yes, from the jewel. Great. Okay. Very nice. And well, with this, I want to once again say thank you very much to our sponsors. And well, tell you again, have a great weekend and enjoy
Bye.
next week as well.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.